good morning for the rest of you from the other time zones. Welcome to Building the Policy Environment for SDG Financing in Asia Pacific. I am Pat Sion Low, Chief of Staff at AVPN, and I am delighted to have you join us today. For those of you who do not know about AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves the opportunity to connect, learn, and lead. We're also sharing highlights of our day live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtag #AVPN2020. In today's session, we will be hearing from two government representatives on their perspectives of policy environment and SDG financing, and invite input from industry intermediaries, networks, and development agencies. A few housekeeping announcements before moving to the program proper. Please make sure you are using the app version of Adobe Connect and not the browser version to have the best user experience. To ensure your experience with us this morning is a meaningful one, if my webcam video is causing a lag on your computer, please click to pause the video by hovering the mouse over my face to reduce the usage of your internet bandwidth. You can do the same with other speakers' webcams during this session. You will still be able to hear the audio even when the video is paused. If at any point you get disconnected or have a bad connection, please try to log out of the Adobe Connect app and then log back in. If you are using a browser, try refreshing your page. Please ensure that you are not running other programs in the background. And if you still experience problems, do go to the links sharing box on the bottom left of your screen or the session page on our conference website and try the Zoom option that is being offered. Please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording from our website, conference.avpn.asia. If you continue to have other technical difficulties, please click on the Techies Help link in the link sharing box below or email conference@avpn.asia and we will do our best to quickly assist you. If you have any questions for the speakers, you will be able to type your questions in the Q&A box that will show up at the lower part of the screen later on during the session. By now, you have already been introducing yourself in a community chat box, which is wonderful to see. When you raise your questions for the speakers, the moderator will look through them and raise them for speakers to address. Do include your name and organization in your questions and any specific speaker that the question is directed to. Due to time constraints, please understand if the speakers may not be able to respond to all questions. Lastly, if you do take a look at the bottom of the screen, we have also provided a download resources box from which to download resource files of interest. Finally, for delegates with full access login, please continue interacting with your speakers and fellow delegates after this session using the AVPN connector. The link will also be found in the links sharing box on the bottom left of your screen. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator and speakers. We have today joining us Smita Nakuda, Senior Results Management Specialist from the Asian Development Bank, Emily Davis, SDG Financial Specialist from UNDP, Amalia Adininga Widyasanti, Senior Advisor to the Minister for National Development Planning, Indonesia, Rizal Bashar Siddiq, Joint Secretary, Economic Relations Division, Ministry of Finance of Bangladesh, Adam Cotter, Head of Asia, Official Monetary Financial Institutions Forum, Tomoyuki Yamada, Head of Private Sector Development, JICA, and Aditi Haldar, South Asia Head, Global Reporting Initiative. At this time, I'd like to turn the session over to our moderator, Ms. Smita Nakuda. Smita, please turn on your microphone and webcam, and the floor is now yours.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well, and thanks very much to AVPN and UNDP for the invitation to moderate what I think will be a very interesting discussion. So by way of introduction, I coordinate the Asian Development Bank's response to the Sustainable Development Goals, and in that context have a long-standing collaboration with UNDP on this whole set of questions that we'll grapple with on this panel, around how it is that we mobilize the financing necessary for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And in that context, the theme of today's session at ABPN is very resonant and relevant for this panel because it's about collaboration. And collaboration has relevance for this agenda in lots of ways, including as we seek to put in place the policy and regulatory signals that will enable private sector players to have a more active role in responding to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm really excited to be able to be part of this session where we'll hear a little bit from governments in our region about efforts that they've been making to this end, from partner networks that have been working with private sector players to enable them to do more on this agenda. But let me first start by handing the floor over to Emily Davis, who coordinates the Asia Pacific Financing Facility on the Sustainable Development Goals for UNDP, to talk a little bit about what this unique network has been seeking to do on this critical agenda. Emily, please, and I'll turn my mic.
Thank you, Smita. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I'm Emily Davis from UNDP and also coordinator for the Asia Pacific SDG Financing Facility. It's a pleasure to be here with the panel today. And we'll just kick off today setting the stage a bit to share some about the trends in Asia Pacific that we see on SDG financing strategies and also what we're seeing through the public sector lens of how we can bring private investment to the SDGs. And secondly, on the value of regional platforms and networks, like many of you here, to see how we can support country level and country-led collaboration. So we'll just start with a bit of background. Oh, I'm not sure this is, I'm going through the slides. So countries in Asia Pacific have been taking steps toward more integrated approaches to financing SDGs. Most all countries in Asia Pacific have national plans, but most of these plans do not have costings associated with them, nor do they have financing strategies. Very few have these strategies, and some of these are very difficult to implement without taking into account the variety of different types of financing. So our work in Asia Pacific has focused on how we're working with governments on integrated national financing frameworks. And INFF, or Integrated National Financing Framework, is a planning and delivery tool to help countries strengthen planning processes and overcome existing impediments to financing the SDGs at country level. It lays out the full range of financing resources, including domestic and international public and private finance, and allows countries to develop a financing strategy to increase investment, manage risks, and achieve sustainable development priorities. In the current landscape, we see three trends and opportunities in the current environment where INFFs could add value and where international, public, and private actors will be able to support. The first is with financing strategies led by governments, typically Ministry of Finance, and I think we'll hear a bit from our government partners today about this. The rapidly changing trends in financing flows resulting from COVID-19 require governments to put in place an ability to monitor flows and their impacts while placing the right measure to be able to scale up finance for recovery. A large-scale fiscal and financial effort for counter-cyclical spending is needed everywhere, and while most countries are in the midst of the response phase, very soon they'll be shifting to a different model of support to look at strategies for financing national recovery. These recovery plans and a new generation of medium-term development plans and financing strategies to accompany them will need to respond to social and economic impacts from the pandemic, and also need to find ways to build back better to accelerate future progress for the SDGs. A second opportunity is around strengthening transparency and accountability. Without robust frameworks for transparency and accountability, there can be no possibility of recovering sustainably. As we move forward to construct a financing system for the future, we need to do so with sustainable development at its heart, with public and private sectors accountable for the SDGs. One part of this is national budgets in terms of transparency and accountability. These are critical to financing a sustainable recovery, both in terms of domestic as well as international public finance. Moving from response to recovery in the COVID social, economic, and financing responses, it will be critical to adopt a coherent approach to budget management that is in place and that the SDGs are providing a frame for that. And this will enable governments to ensure effectiveness and efficiency at a time of great fiscal constraint. Secondly, this involves transparency and accountability in the private sector. With regards to private finance, we need frameworks that will enable private investors to account for their alignment with recovery and also eventually back to a full framework of the SDGs after recovery. A common framework is needed for these investors and enterprises to have parameters to measure, manage, and communicate where their COVID response is going, and also in terms of the SDG contributions that they're making, so that we are measuring in a way that is accountable to both public and private sector. This includes standards to also provide a more rigorous and transparent framework for evaluating SDG benefiting initiatives. Thirdly, an opportunity in a new generation of national plans post-COVID. As the world emerges from this crisis and moves toward recovery, we have an opportunity to re-examine our approach to SDG achievement and to create a better, stronger, more resilient, inclusive future through national planning. With current challenges, we may be looking at a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get our national plans right. This means building in integration of SDGs, as well as building in risk and shock factors and scenarios to ensure plans are accompanied by robust financing strategies from both public and private sources. We know that until now, many plans have not been informed by adequate consideration of risk, and that we have an opportunity to have a common collaborative instrument across public and private sectors. We need to ensure that this builds on the momentum that we have seen in the past few months, where we have seen public and private sector work together in ways that would have been unimaginable for the priority of national interest in the past few months. So moving beyond the budget alone is a main focus of the INFF and our work with ministries of finance across the region. We're working with governments to strengthen their INFFs and reforms toward implementing financing strategies by looking at these opportunities about how we can spend the budget to deliver sustainable development priorities, how we can manage enterprises to maximize contributions to sustainable development, how we can collaborate better with development partners to align with these national priorities, and how can we mobilize and align private participation in public investment. We've also identified with partners some areas of focus where these reforms can focus on both efficiency and effectiveness for both the public and private stakeholders. And these are some examples of the opportunities where stakeholders can add value to catalyze investment in the SDGs. This covers resource mobilization domestically, including progressive tax systems, carbon tax, avoiding expenditures, and measures around reforms for budgeting for SDGs. And in the private sector, this involves new measures to be able to engage investors effectively in financing strategies and plans, tax incentives, sustainability reporting, and also other enabling environment measures to enable further investment in the SDGs. The focus of our work in the Asia Pacific SDG financing facility looks at different ways that we can strengthen the governance of financing from the public perspective. This looks at costing to say how can we strengthen government capacity and processes for estimating the cost of sustainable development objectives, and how can we use this data to inform policy making. In monitoring, it looks at how we can effectively track and understand the sustainable development impacts of a broader range of public and private financing. It looks at coordination to be able to bring actors together from across government and the private sector at country level for these reforms. Also on dialogue to effectively engage representatives of the private sector, and also see how we can catalyze and also complement their roles in terms of financing sustainable development. And then also capacity, and looking at the institutional capacity to effectively manage and develop new instruments. The Asia Pacific SDG financing facility, we're looking at our new architecture to see how the facility can redesign and relaunch. So we're engaging partners and many of yourselves to be able to support this country-led regional platform in terms of supporting and implementing INFFs. The pillars of this work are around peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, technical assistance, and also South-South learning. So the regional platform is on the basis of helping countries to learn from one another in financing SDGs and helping them to build country-level platforms to build sustainable constituencies for reform and kind of broaden the table and the actors at the table who are discussing issues of integrating financing, planning, and budgeting at country level. So we have a multi-stakeholder approach to this to be able to look across different sectors and actors to support governments in their design of their INFF platforms. And we have a variety of partners that we're getting involved in our work streams. And we'd be very, very keen to hear from many of you and be involved in our consultation in the coming weeks, so please do reach out. But for today, we just wanted to frame the discussion around some of our lessons from the region and recognizing the power of regional networks in this space and the power of regional platforms to build constituencies for reform. So with that, and with many thanks to our panelists and to Sumita and ADB, and also to AVPN for hosting this very innovative and engaging virtual discussion, we look forward to the discussion with.
Great, many thanks, Emily, for that presentation setting out the APFIN's efforts in this space. One country government that's really stood out as a leader in terms of both taking action on the Sustainable Development Goals and thinking creatively about ways to partner with the private sector to mobilize financing for those goals is Indonesia. So I was hoping that we could hear from Ibu Vini of Bappenas to hear a little bit about the approach that Indonesia has been taking to this particular challenge and some of the strategic areas of emphasis in that context. So please, Ibu Vini, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully that you can hear my voice very clearly. First of all, I would like to share with you regarding to what we would that Indonesia has already undertaken Let me double check this one first. Can you go to the next slide? I would like to share with you regarding to next one. You can start with slide number 3. In the macroeconomic context, that Indonesia is actually the country that within the last 5 years we can manage the growth rate at 5%. Can you go to the previous one, please? Next. But the thing is that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that Indonesia government is really fully aware that the economic growth will be slowing down for Indonesia. So we are projected that in 2020, our outlook of economic growth is within minus 0.4 to 2.3%. So if the pandemic of COVID-19 will not be contained very soon, then meaning that in Q3, the Indonesian economy cannot be recovered. So with that, Indonesia is projected that the economic growth will be around 0%. But the thing is that it's not happen for Indonesia only. We realize that it will happen also in the other countries in the world. Next one. Can you click? So the picture will come out. Can you click one more, please? So I will not explain about this how integrated financing framework about, because it has been explained by the previous speaker. But I just want to mention that Indonesia is also one of the countries that joined the pilot projects of the integrated financing framework. So actually we are really happy, and then we really enthusiastic to be a part of the pilot project countries for the INFF, because we see that INFF is very useful for Indonesia in the implementation of SDGs to achieve the 2030 agenda. Next one. Next one. So The INFF in Indonesia is not really start from the zero, because we have had the existing building blocks for an Indonesian INFF. For example, if you know that INFF is consisting of 4 pillars, which is assessment and diagnostics, financing strategy, and also monitoring and review, and also governance and coordination. In each pillar, Indonesia has something to start with. So we are not really starting from zero. For example, for existing assessment and diagnostics, Indonesia has undertaken total official support for sustainable development in collaboration with OECD. Indonesia has also undertaken the SDGs costing as a part of our roadmap of SDGs 2030. And for financing strategy, we also have the medium-term funding strategy, where in our medium-term development plan, we also already mainstreamed SDGs into our national medium-term development plan. And for example, for monitoring and review, we have like an existing framework for monitoring and evaluation for our development plan. That could be also one of the building blocks to have a better, or to have like a framework of INFF. Next one. Next slide. So this is the total official before the previous one. This is actually the total official support for a sustainable development pilot study that is actually in collaboration with OECD. With this, the TOSD measurement framework, that the TOSD is actually a framework to measure resources in support for sustainable development goal by measuring the cross-border flows, which is resources extended to eligible countries, and also how much does Indonesia contribute to global and regional expenditures in support to sustainable development. So with this concept of two-pillar framework, it is actually a measure how actually the cross-border resource flows to Indonesia can contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals. And also Indonesia already been contributed to global and regional expenditures in support of development that is enabling the other countries or international public goods to address the global challenge. Next. This is also one of the partnerships in the implementation of SDGs in Indonesia. For example, Indonesia Business Community for Sustainable Development. This is actually the report from the company's best practices in Indonesia, where they already supporting and they already been contributed to the achievement of SDGs in Indonesia. So we are glad and we are really happy the private sectors in Indonesia awareness on SDGs and their contribution to SDGs is also increasing time by time. Next. So we also lucky to have a partnership, this previous one. We also lucky that we have a partnership with FEPN in the implementation of SDGs in Indonesia. We have a memorandum of understanding between our ministry and FEPN, and FEPN is becoming our potential partner for collaborating with Bappenas, with my ministry, especially to establish SDGs financing hub, and also among the 35 members in Indonesia, and also we are now working in partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is also a member of FEPN. Next one. This is actually the SDGs costing that is already been stated and already been explained in our roadmap of SDGs Indonesia towards 2030. However, it is also important to note that the gap the financing gap for SDGs that already been counted in that roadmap could be becoming broader because of the new normal and the after COVID-19 pandemic. So with this situation, then next one. So we're really aware that the financing SDGs in the new normal, in the context of after COVID-19, we really have to be ready. So currently Indonesia is also committed to provide fiscal stimulus package and monetary policy easing. And we also know that the stimulus package has to address the issues towards sustainable development in several aspects, especially for the health sector. But the thing is that what should we do besides fiscal stimulus package and monetary policy easing? Because we understand that fiscal stimulus and monetary policy is not enough to address the issues of COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, we are thinking that we have to do something else, such as strengthening public and private investment in sustainable development, such as building resilient infrastructure. The second one is strengthening social protection, additional investment in crisis prevention, risk reduction and planning, as well as eliminating trade barriers and restrictions that affect supply chain disruption. So the government of Indonesia is also responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by actually refocusing the development theme of 2021. That this is a response of the government of Indonesia how to address the issue of new normal. Therefore, in our development plan of 2021, the theme is refocused and revisited to become accelerating economic recovery and social reform. So the development plan of 2021 is really refocused on one, recovery of industry, investment and tourism. Second, social system reform, health system reform, disaster resilience system reform, and food security reform. Next. Probably I will have one more slide. Next one. So, financing for sustainable development. Previous one, please. Financing for sustainable development in the new normal also should address the potentials of transformative digital technologies. Why is it important? Because we understand that we ensure digital technology can ensure human and economic activities with social distancing protocols, because while we are in the social distancing protocols that we have to ensure our activities can still going on, that in that situation, digital technology is very important to support and to ensure our activities can still go on. The second one is enable inclusion and efficiency. But we also need to be aware digital technologies can also create inequalities, uncertainties, and new risks, such as job losses and wage inequality. So that's why the government of Indonesia is also noted that there is an important role of the government, such as that we should not only aim to accelerate technological progress, but we also need to address exclusion and risk of discrimination and ensure that the benefits of technology advancement can also reach the society at large, which is an inclusive principle that really stated in our SDGs. I think that is something that I can share today, and if you have further questions, we can discuss it during the discussion session. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Ibu Winnie, for that perspective on Indonesia's efforts. Let me now turn to Mr. Siddique of the Ministry of Finance in Bangladesh to share a little bit of his institution's efforts on this agenda as well. Please.
Thank you, Smita. I hope you can hear me. Yeah.
You will, please.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be with you today to share on behalf of Government of Bangladesh with this diverse group of attendees to discuss experience and substantive insights from the region on integrated national financing frameworks. We know that there is a strong collective commitment and action on Agenda 2030 and financing for development at the global level. There is also increasing interest broadly from the private sector in aligning capital and activities with the SDGs. But sustainable development progress will be driven at the country. As such, government will play the most critical role. Today we got the opportunity to share our experience to close the gap and bring country experiences to the regional level. Now let me share about our experience in Bangladesh. As you know, Bangladesh did well in Millennium Development Goals, and building on the success of this MDG, Bangladesh is strongly committed to implement the SDGs. And the government has adopted whole of the society approach to ensure the participation of NGO, CSO, and also the private sector and development partners. So far we have done the mapping the ministries, data gap analysis we did, and we have done the national monitoring and evaluation framework we have prepared, and we did an assessment and we prepared the financing strategy so far. The private sector in Bangladesh has been the driver of economic growth. Like many other developing countries, their investment share stands at around 80%. Almost all previous mid-term development plans largely relied on the private financing. The 7th five-year plan, which we are going to implement, which we are on the verge of implementation. In this 7th five-year plan, there was an estimated contribution of private sector around 77.3%. And a large number of targets of SDGs are related to growth, employment, and the delivery of key services such as education, health, which could not be achieved without the active participation of the private sector. And country-led actions, reforms, and innovations are and will be the driver for financial development towards 2030. A number of countries, such as my own, are implementing reforms to accelerate progress in linking finance with results. It begins with common understanding where we are, where we want to go, and how much we need to get there. Bangladesh was one of the first countries in the world to have estimated the cost of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Another step was taken, development finance assessment, with a strong focus on the role of both private sector and the development partner. The DFA provided clarity on the finance flows and provoked dialogue on the types of institutional policy reforms. This is an example of one step taken, among others, we will hear about today, that addresses the need for whole of government integrated approach to financing the SDGs. Following the steps that showed us where we are and where we wanted to go in 2017, we addressed the how. Now the Bangladesh Planning Commission launched the SDG financing strategy designed to identify the priority interventions needed to achieve the SDG. The strategy estimates about how much SDG will cost down to each SDG and breaks these costs down into 4 types of resources. Those are domestic public, domestic private, international public, and international private. The financing strategy estimates that Bangladesh will require an additional amount of $928 billion to fully achieve the SDG over the lifetime. And the annual average additional cost would be around $66 billion. The public sector would account for 34% of this total financial requirements, whereas the private sector will contribute around 42%. So the share of the private sector is much higher than the public sector. In the 7th five-year plan, the target was set to increase the private investment to 35% of GDP However, as of now, only 23% we could achieve. So one of the main targets of our next 5-year plan, that is we are going to adopt in July next month, which will be implemented during 2021 to 2025. Our main target would be to increase the private investment during the next 5-year plan. The government has recently adopted the country's second perspective plan, which will be implemented from 2021 to 2041. And the aim of this plan is to make Bangladesh a higher income and developed country by the year 2041. And the plan sets targets to increase per capita income of the country to $12,500 and the GDP growth rate to 9.9% to 2041 and reduce poverty rate to below 3% and the extreme poverty to 0.68% by that time. And to achieve this, a huge investment from the private sector would be required. Though it can sound overwhelming, cost estimates are a valuable foundation for our ability to take action. With these targets for different public and private flows, we also need to examine the effectiveness and the outcomes that different financing flows contribute toward. For policymakers, the SDG financing strategy can extend the link between the national plans and the SDG. Now let me talk about collaboration with the private sector. The government is trying to engage private sector to implement the SDG. The modalities of engagement are reinvigorate the contributions of the private sectors, engaging private sectors through incentive or disincentive mechanism, engaging private sector through laws and rules, and through corporate social responsibility, CSR. The government motives is to enable the private investment atmosphere by focusing on improving service delivery, access to electricity and natural gas, creating new port and increasing the efficiency of the existing ones, establishing new economic zones, subsidies to potential sectors, removal of procedural bottlenecks, innovative engagement with the private sector and ICT development. We have established a platform for public-private dialogue and SDGs. A public-private working committee called Sustainability and Green Growth Working Committee is established for harmonizing economic growth with environmental sustainability. Private Sector Development Policy Coordination Committee has been set up by the Prime Minister's Office, where higher government officials sit with the private sector's leaders. These platforms aims to build trust between leaders, the public and private sector, and create forum for discussing policy solutions that can unlock greater and more sustainable and inclusive private commercial investment. Our central bank has adopted 404 inclusive and sustainable monetary policies, agricultural and SME credit policies and programs. All these direct towards sustainable credit flow for need-based beneficiaries. Bangladesh Investment Development Authority has reformed itself in 2016. It has taken various measures and reformed policies for the implementation of SDG. The law for a fully functional and automated one-stop service for the investors has been already approved by the cabinet, and now the rules are being formulated. IDA is strengthening local communities for promoting SMEs through local network SDG action plan and advocating local industries to participate in UN Global Impact. The government has adopted new policy for SME in 2019 to make more vibrant SME sector that can help achieving the SDG. Bangladesh has initiated steps in order to pursue progress on economic, social and environmental targets in a balanced and integrated manner through public-private partnership. And the government has enacted laws and rules for promoting PPP. There are some commendable initiatives taken by the private sector in line with SDG. Like HSBC has partnered with UNDP in a thought leadership program that is called Leveraging Sustainable Supply Chain in Apparel in 2018. Consumer goods giant, that is Unilever Bangladesh, they joined UNDP business call to action with a commitment to educate 5 million rural children on hand washing and toothbrushing, and to ensure access to safe drinking water for over 1 million people and ensure above minimum wage employment for thousands of the workers by the year 2021. From our experience, it is clear that each component and actor involved in our approach to financing are very much interconnected and dependent on another. If planning and finance system are misaligned, then how can we know whether planned reforms and financing trends will be sufficient? If businesses are not consulted about their impact, then how can the government support growth and mitigate risk? How can we work toward the same priorities? If monitoring systems are weak, how can we identify the most and least effective areas of policy? Now let me share some of our thoughts that how AFIN offered to scale up the collaboration between government and the private sector. Bangladesh has been.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm so sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I think we need to start wrapping up so we can move into the discussion section, if you don't mind. So if you just want to make your final.
Can you give me 30 seconds? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Bangladesh has been a supporter of the Asia Pacific SDG financing facility since 2013 and having a regional facility to provide a platform, facilitate dialogue and generate knowledge and recommendations for policy making has been very useful for many countries in the region. First, AFIN has helped to design toolkit, that is the DFA, that has helped 18 countries in the region to take a more holistic approach, providing an opportunity to develop a vision across government to finance the SDG and build a common understanding of the landscape, policy frameworks, and investment gaps and opportunities. These tools, including assistance to design and extend an integrated national financial frameworks, has helped countries to build a regional body of knowledge and country examples to learn from. By providing analysis of these strengths and platform for dialogue, AFIN and other regional bodies can play a facilitation role to bring together policymakers and private sector to identify opportunities, access knowledge, and offer advice to one another. I think Emily has already presented about this. I think if this could be implemented in this region, then all the countries will be benefited from this platform from AFIN. The evidence today shows for successful government-private sector collaboration, there is capacity constraint at both sides. The private sector does not know where to start, and the government people, they do not know how to start. So AFIN may come forward for the capacity building of the private sector as well as the government in the region, so that they can also support. The AFIN can also support in peer-to-peer learning in this region. Thank you, Smita. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Bashar. So we've now heard from a lot of our government partners about some of their hopes about what the private sector can deliver and their efforts to enable that. And we now move into the discussion section of this session, where we'll hear from a few of our partners that actually work with private sector players in order to try to achieve that particular end. So let me first move to Adam Cotter, who's the head of the Asia section of the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum. Adam, could you tell us a little bit about how some of the financial institutions and stakeholders that your network represents are stepping up to engage on this challenge and some of your experiences in that regard?
Well, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, but also to ABPN for inviting me and ONFIF to share some thoughts. I have to say, what I'm going to say represents my personal views and not those of ONFIF or the central banks and other institutions that we have in our membership. So firstly, for those of you who aren't familiar with ONFIF, as we like to call it, it's an independent think tank, central bank, economic policy and public investment, and we focus on global policy and investment themes relating to central banks, sovereign funds, public pension funds, regulators and treasuries, and what we term as global public investors, which are predominantly the central banks, sovereign funds and public pension funds. And these are large institutional investors, all of you know, and they have investable assets of nearly 40 trillion US dollars. Now, definitely what we are seeing within this group is a definite shift in fiduciary thinking to a much more holistic and encompassing view of how these institutions have an ability to shape long-term socio-economic trends for better or worse for future generations. These large investors were once more concerned, of course, with long-term investment risks and trends, and short-term investors like hedge funds pursue different strategies. But what we are seeing is it's increasingly the case where distinguishing between what were once long-term chronic risks, such as climate change, or and more short-term risks are becoming increasingly blurred. But it's not all just about the investments and the money, but it's also a big question about law and regulation. And with this in mind, central banks as regulators and also other independent regulators have a role in ensuring that the financial system is fair, to coin a phrase from Mark Carney, where fair represents both fair, aligned, inclusive and resilient. And a lot of this thinking by central bankers derives from this speech by Mark Carney that he gave about 5 years ago, which is all about trouble on the horizon. Now, central banks also, of course, need to take responsibility for safeguarding financial stability against these chronic risks in the global economy. Historically, it's often been the case that central banks have been blamed for not spotting crises early enough. But then, ironically, they always get rewarded with greater powers and an extended remit. So we're seeing this around the world, where they are no longer just the lender of last resort, but they also have a much greater role in ensuring financial stability. Now, in practice, that means that many central banks in developed and developing countries proactively seek to promote the sustainable economic development. And they do this predominantly either through the promotion of financial inclusion and aligning the financial system with sustainable development, but also opening up discussion on the scope of and limits to the mandates of the central banks, which undoubtedly complicates matters as development objectives are often at times in conflict with stability objectives, and of course also more trickily very political objectives as well. So this is something they have to navigate. But central banks have this role as what I like to call sort of an ethical compass. And the real question that central banks and regulators have to grapple with is whether ESG ratings often go far enough to bring about sustainability benefits and mitigate material risks, such as sea level rises in the future. So they need to question whether essentially being labelled as sustainable or green cannot just be relative to peers. It has to be linked to the fact that these investments will concretely move the needle forward to accomplish the SDGs and to mitigate these risks in the long term. Now, I know we're short of time, but I just want to also go on to the other group of institutions that we work closely with, which is the large asset owners, the sovereign wealth funds, the public pension funds. Of course,
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt for a moment. Could you hold your microphone a little bit closer to you, as many on the line cannot hear you very clearly? Thank you so much.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Much, thank you.
Sorry about that. Well, I hope you heard that. And sorry for those who didn't. But then moving on, so to the second cohort, which is the asset owners. They have, of course, been investing in alternative assets in recent years, and a lot of that's through co-financing arrangements. And these are very conducive to achieving SDGs because it's a good way of accessing sectors that, like infrastructure, as we heard from the speakers before, but also real estate, agriculture and forestry, which show tremendous potential to support achieving these goals and their sustainable development as well. Obviously, the UN has been doing lots of work in this space as well, and 2015 was a watershed moment in terms of asset owners and their views on SDG investing, given the launch of the Sustainable Development Investments Framework. However, a lot of the investors say there remains a need for improved disclosure, and investors or anyone interested in achieving the SDGs is always looking for output or outcome data that measures the actual impact on the ground, and we don't have a lot of that data, unfortunately. So a shareholder that's doing ESG integration would be interested in the risks associated from ESG data on the financial performance of its portfolios. And of course, many of the asset owners are asking whether their portfolio is ready to take on the true challenges that are coming, such as sea level rises, and that's where the issue of data lies, as a lot of the existing data might be undervaluing or underestimating a significant amount of risk. So I think just in the interest of time, I will pause there, but then I can speak later as well, as I know we have a number of other speakers to get through.
Many thanks, Adam, for those reflections from OMFIC's perspective. A lot of us have talked about the importance of having good information to inform what the private sector is doing, and also to inform government approaches to try to more effectively harness the private sector investment capacity on these issues. And here, I think the whole role of reporting and impact management takes on a hugely relevant role. So I'd like to turn now to Aditi Haldar, who's with the Global Reporting Standards for Impact Assessment and Reporting, to share her perspectives on how this groundswell of activity related to sustainability reporting might be able to support government and private sector efforts to scale up financing for the SDGs. Aditi, please. Sorry, Aditi, we can't hear you. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Thanks. So I have a short presentation which I would like to use, and that's been uploaded here. Can that come on the screen?
Let me check with our AVPN colleagues if that's possible, or perhaps Aditi, you could just speak off the cuff and you could make those.
Maybe I can just speak and you can all download the file. Yeah.
Perfect. That would be great.
Yeah. So I work for Global Reporting Initiative. In short, we call it GRI, and we are in existence for the last 22 years. It's an international independent standards organization that helps businesses, governments, and other organizations understand and communicate impacts on issues ranging in the aspect of environment, economic, social, and governance topics, and includes issues like climate change, human rights, and corruption, and many others. Yeah? So our mission is to empower decisions that create social, environmental, and benefits for everyone. Now, if we come back to the whole, aspect of development and focusing on business, because I think our key stakeholders right from the beginning had been businesses who need to be transparent, to talk about what are their products and services for the society, for building on the comfort and well-being of people, and therefore the need for moving materials, technology, money, capital, facility, locality, and nation, and then of course moving people to kind of harness their skill and competency and the productivity. So the purpose of business are actually this, when they look at the granularity of actually having a vision, taking a decision on what are those products and services which are required by society, and the actions that need to follow on to really make that movement of technology, materials, money, and facility and people happen. And then of course the delivery and the use and the after use of the products and services. So that's the entire value chain of the activities of businesses. So in there, I think to bring all of us together to look at the impact of business, I think it's important to understand that, of course, in countries in Asia and other parts, so we do see the positive impacts of businesses, profits going up and innovation happening and employment generation and production and of course the contribution to the welfare of society, which leads to development. But on the flip side, we do have many negative impacts which are leading to the crisis of resources, pollution and waste and the leaching of effluents and so on and so forth. And therefore, the health and safety of not only just the employees of business entities, but communities and consumers. And therefore, we all measure everything through GDP. That's like the common way of measuring, our progress as a human race. But we do also see that wealth concentration is increasing, and therefore disparity is also happening. So it's nothing new that I'm sharing here, but just to bring in the context of where GRI works, I thought this is important that I bring this up here. Looking at the situation of the virus and from the multi-focused lens, from GRI, we spoke to and we are still speaking to a lot of stakeholders across government, investor groups, leading businesses, both from the large and the leading organizations, and including also SMEs. And we are also talking to regulators, we are talking to civil societies and international bodies. So the business impact that we have seen is not just the risk of the workforce productivity, but business continuity and resilience, and the operational disruption that has happened. And this is also a big question mark which is coming from the shop floor to the board about having oversight of their preparedness to face not only this kind of crisis, but maybe another one soon. Yeah. So the global impact that is seen is like the public health and economic downturn and the magnified global inequalities. And of course, we see a very, very positive one, which is the reduction of pollution and the climate footprint. Yeah. But on the other side, the stakeholders impact area from business activities are because common people's lifestyle has changed for the last 2.5 months. And we see consumption pattern completely changing. On the flip side, disruption of the supply chain and money not coming, transferring, although committed, orders and contracts were already in place. The government support and transparency under scrutiny, this is a big, big question mark which has come. The bigger question mark which is coming back is the investor returns. And how does GRI work here? So GRI is all about information, and we believe that without information, no decision can happen. So for business and stakeholders, we work with basically 3-4 pillars, which is the business, the government, the investor groups, and civil society and the consumer groups. So GRI standard, which enables different constituencies to refer to this common reference point by using the GRI standard and disclosing information about environment, social, economic, and governance topics. Because we strongly understand for the last 22 years of experience that decisions and actions happen when information is there. Target setting can happen, areas of improvement, showcasing achievements, can be promoted amongst peers, and therefore trust can be built in the market, within, amongst policymakers and also among the consumers. Now, how does GRI work with the SDGs? So GRI is a bridge between business and government, enabling them both to make positive contributions to the UN SDGs. So we are a data-driven organization where we not only link the big picture of business activities, but also take the business leaders and small entities to understand what is the way for them to analyze risks and opportunities, to come down to management system which can help them move forward, and to get into the granular part of using matrices of measurements which not only help them to understand their performances within, but also impacts outside. And therefore, it leads to impacts such as, what are their activities which are leading to maybe impacting the quality and quantity of water? What are those activities which are leading to the health and safety of consumers down the line and not just their workers. So when the SDGs got formulated, I think reporting also became a centerpiece on seeing how SDGs can be achieved through the power of information. And therefore, GRI is actually helping businesses to be empowered by looking at uncomfortable questions which are coming back to them, not only today because of this virus, but many, many months back and many years back. So it helps them make progress and better decision making. Our work here is actually to build the culture of transparency. And the culture of transparency takes a while. It may start with just preparing a sustainability report and someone in the organization taking the leadership to kind of put the report up on a public domain and back that up with measurements on a daily basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, and an annual basis to look at material information that is most relevant to the business and the stakeholders. So these measurement matrices are created jointly by stakeholders, and it leads to management and change and communication. So our work today is about this measurements, management, change, and communication, and we are empowering businesses and governments to look at the analysis of goals and targets, each one of them, back the and their gaps, and also help them give a practical guide to defining what are those priority areas across the 17 SDGs and 169 targets for them to start reporting, to take action, and also work on the other side to look at actions moving up to reporting better and including more and more issues that are becoming more relevant in the coming months and coming years. Yeah. So thank you all for listening.
Thanks a lot, Aditi. I'm sorry to cut you off a little bit, but we're running quite far behind time, and we still have one more panelist who's been waiting patiently to share his perspective. So let me turn now to Mr. Tomoyuki Yamada of JICA, which of course focuses a great deal of its effort on trying to partner with the private sector to make investments that can deliver on the SDGs. And I'd be interested to hear your perspectives on how policy can be most effectively leveraged in order to achieve those agendas. So please, and again, if we can ask you to keep your comments succinct, since unfortunately we are running a little bit behind time. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to appreciate ADPN for inviting this wonderful occasion. I will quickly do my comments because we are running out of time. And I just presented a presentation slide. I just asked Cassian, can you show the second slide of my presentation? Because my department in JICA is a kind of ODA implementator, and my department is in charge of private sector development. Sorry, can you show the previous slide, please? That's correct. Yes, because private sector development is, by definition, is not the holistic coverage. Like we discussing all about the all SDG goals, how we are able to align. Sorry, how we are able to align the public and the private finance to align in order to achieve the development SDG goal. It's purely handling the private sector investment in the developing countries. But we have learned today that from the several speakers that we need to address the financing gap and we need to mobilize the private financing. That's been a very big question. So that the several points I would like to share with you based on our experience in the private sector development can be useful for us in order to understand how private entities can be mobilized or encouraged in make more investment in the developing countries. And just These slides explain our fundamental framework of approach to the private sector development. The gray box is about the business environment. For sure, we need to take care of the environment. It is very sound for private entities to play. But in addition, more specifically, we need to take care of the linkage of the farms with the outside business player. In addition to it, we need to take care of finance, access to finance. A lot of private firms cannot reach the reasonable finance source. And our approach is not only limited to the environmental improvement. Rather, we are taking care of the farm's capability, for instance, management capability and production capability, as well as innovation creation, how we are able to encourage them to create innovations. So based on this approach, I would like to quickly point out 3 challenges we are now facing in promoting private finance. Firstly, we need to take care of sound business environment. Sound business environment is very simple notion, but in reality it's not that simple. What we have experienced in different countries that private sector development cannot be realized by single policy or government scheme, since it is in relation to the several policies such as investment, industry, taxation and trade, and sometimes human resource development. So that the government agency or government department should coordinate among related a number of departments. That can be challenges for many government. The second point is, yes, access to finance is still the key for the private entities to make an investment, because a lot of SMEs in the local are facing the challenges to get the finance, so that they are not able to finance their business plan if that takes long term and long term. So we need to take care how we are able to improve this situation is the second key for the private entities to play their business. The third point is that the innovation, the production and management capacity of the farm itself. After COVID-19, maybe it's something to do with the new business development, facing the new challenges. So that some sort of support or encouragement for them to go for a much more productive way or good management or good new business facing the COVID-19 in order to encourage them to work in broader context and encourage them to expand their businesses. Those 3 points I would like to point out in order to proceed to get more engagement of private entities to come in and to catalyze well by our public entities work. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those perspectives, really helpful. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, we're running quite far behind time, a testament, I think, to the richness of our panelists and presenters' inputs. But if we could maybe take a few moments to just reflect. It's clear that this is a huge agenda with a lot that needs to be done by many and a critical role for partnerships in this regard. And I hope that the presentations that we've had on this panel provide some useful food for thought for UNDP and other partners in the Asia Pacific Financing for Sustainable Development platform about how they can better bring key players together to grapple with some of these issues. I know that there are a number of questions that participants in the session had posed through the online chat platform, which I've directed to specific panelists who I hope will be able to offer you a chat-based answer because there isn't time to get into the discussion, unfortunately. So with that, let me now hand over to Pat-Syan for her general housekeeping remarks and to wrap up the session. So Pat-Syan, please.
Thank you very much, Smita, Emily, Amalia, Bashar, Adam, Aditi, and Yamada. We knew that we were asking a lot to have so many perspectives in 1 hour, yet all of you have offered up really rich information and insights that illustrates the potential for policy to catalyze SDG financing. And you'll be excited to know that we have 511 delegates logged into this session, which clearly demonstrates the level of interest in this topic. So please continue to browse the agenda as we have other deep dive sessions that will go more deeply into specific markets and tools to achieve this goal. We have now come to the end of building the policy environment for SDG financing in Asia Pacific. We ask you to please take a few moments to tell us what you thought of the session by filling in the poll that is now showing up on your screen. And we also want to draw your attention to the download resources box, which provides you with links where you can download the presentation files that our speakers had shared. You could see that they had more to share than we had time to allow them to speak more about. So I would please like to invite all delegates to feel free to download the presentation files that are on the download resources box at the moment. We thank our lead partners, Chandra Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Eden Prize, and our impact partner, UNDP, for making this session possible. Do connect with more conference delegates at the ABPN Connector and share your highlights of this session on social media, remembering to tag us with hashtag ABPN2020. The next session, called Strategically Leveraging Corporate Resources for Social Impact, will be starting at 6 p.m. Singapore time in approximately 45 minutes. You can also access the session through the link directly in the link sharing box on the bottom left of the screen. Thank you all for your attention and patience and participation. We will now be closing this session and we hope you'll enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a good afternoon.